Originally, this episode was going to be about Legal Tech Talk, a conference in London a couple of weeks ago that I was not able to attend. Guest Denisa Kopandi agreed to come on to give me a download on what I missed. But our conversation quickly turned to something that I found much more interesting, which was the way that Denisa, a senior associate at a top-tier Romanian law firm, went about approaching the event. She didn't just go to learn about which tools and methods to incorporate into her day-to-day practice. She took the opportunity to do a deep dive into what her client, Denisa, were doing and what it meant for her practice. The result was a really interesting conversation with lots of useful insights into how lawyers should think about client service, lawyer training, and the business model of the modern law firm in a world where AI is transforming the needs and expectations of corporate clients when it comes to their outside counsel. Denisa is a sharp thinker and clever adopter of legal tech, and I took a lot away from our discussion. I hope you do too. Denisa, welcome to Version Up.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining. I missed Legal Tech Talk, the conference last week. I was actually camping at a music festival with my family, and I was trying my hardest to avoid my phone or anything tech or legal related. So I thought it'd be great to have you on and get me up to speed and just tell me what happened. And we can use that as a springboard to talk about where we are with innovation at law firms more generally.
I think you only missed half part of the conference, like the panels and the discussions around. But the part with the music festival, I think you've got that part because at the conference it had this music festival vibe. There was a DJ in a corner, there was another corner with a guy playing the guitar.
Okay.
There was a spa place, so many, surprises and different booths. And the floor with the vendors definitely had a festival vibe and a typical conference vibe. And it was really, really intense with all the time 4 panels going at the same time and trying to get as much of it. But it was definitely worth it.
So I didn't have to be in the hot woods eating out of a car to participate in a music festival scene. It turns out I could have been in London.
Yeah, no, it's like Legal Tech Talk, it's the Coachella of conferences. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they'll be very happy to hear that. So tell me what you learned or what impressions it left on you.
Well, there were, the usual suspects in terms of what the topics were for the agenda. You had the, intersection of law and technology, how we apply tools. Obviously, the new thing right now, which is automation, agentic AI, and the idea of workflows and how to implement them into your legal firm or in-house. It was touched upon transformation of legal teams, their skills and operating models. Also on legal design and how can legal services be transformed into a specific product. Skills, culture, and well-being and how we approach talent and employees and junior lawyers in the AI era. Obviously, AI's limitations and the relationship between attorneys and their clients, and so many other subjects that I've tried to go more to in-house address panels than to the ones that address to lawyers. I'm a Romanian lawyer. Because I was very curious to see how tools are implemented in in-house and if they've made an impact, if the teams are using them, and if they are getting the benefits from it. And obviously, what is the relationship with the attorneys? And what is the work that you still need a lawyer's work? when you have some tools to use in-house.
Let's, if you don't mind, walk through some of those one by one, because I think that's a really helpful framing for conversation. Let's start in reverse, which is the in-house trends. What sort of expectations are you seeing from clients or with the conference about what clients will be expecting from their outside counsel when it comes to AI usage?
I think one for the way in-house teams actually have used and implemented. I think that the conversations were very genuine and very realistic. Nobody was saying we have solved AI. We have no problems. We are doing everything in-house. We are reviewing all the contracts. A big problem was obviously budgets and being able to obtain a budget for acquiring any solution. And a lot of teams seem to have been trying to implement things on their own or develop some things on their own to prove that there is a case for getting a more sophisticated solution for in-house work. And while the part of the reviewing of contracts and drafting, the conversation focused more on how you reorganize the legal departments and how you build legal operations that can work within these systems and then applying the solutions on it.
Maybe we could use that to dovetail into legal design, which you mentioned is something where you take the way that legal services are delivered and you almost kind of productize it more. Is that something clients want at this moment, or is there any discussion of how that impacts the client? Or is that more of an idea that law firms have internally?
So my what I wanted to get out of the conference on this point was because I know on one side you have implementation of agents into the companies, but correlated with the legal function. So for example, if you have a new procurement agent, that one should be correlated with a legal agent that would have something to say in the decisions that the procurement agent will be doing. So if you have a sales agent, not just a sales agent, but as well in terms of the whole business being able to approach the legal department in a new way. So instead of all the requests to be delivered directly to the legal department through any means possible, or Slack or email or so on. So you would have a specific agent that could go through the requests from the company and identify which ones are worth it to be flagged up to the in-house lawyer and which ones could be solved by the agent and maybe just reference to the in-house lawyer to be checked on later. And what I wanted to identify is if this has been implemented in-house. So I understand that there are some solutions that have been used to do this. But my other concern was, and this topic, I haven't seen that there was too much talk about it at the conference. So what happens when there's not a correlation between the legal policies and what the agent will see? Because we have written policies and memorandums for in-house lawyers to read for decades. And those were meant for someone to read them and interpret them as human. But with an agent, and for them to be correlated with the questions that come from sales and business in general. But when you try to do the same thing with an agent, I'm not sure that can be translated and replicated instantly. Because I think what you need to draft is a different style, different type of advice that is more tailored to what an agent can pick up than the way, a competition policy has been drafted. Because the way that business will ask a question will never match completely what was written in the policy. So for example, the policy says no poaching agreements are forbidden, but you will not have an email that will say, I have decided to make an approach agreement with my competitor. You have something vague, like I have been to an industry meeting and somebody else mentioned that maybe we should take on some employees 1 to 3, and maybe that's a good idea. So be something super vague. So my worry is that, one, if you start implementing agents that need to correlate what policy used to look like with what is said in the business, that you might have a mismatch, and that this type of layering might give you the sensation of security that you have it, while kind of exposing you to more risk. So yeah, that's something that I was looking into, and this is connected, to product design. In terms of thinking more of that should be followed, and not so much as legal language, to go away from the way we used to express ourselves and just think everything into rules that agents can later apply. And even for, as I've said, for a procurement agents, we ideally, maybe we can provide a service where we can make a decision tree as lawyers to provide to our clients instead of a legal memorandum. But that's just something I was thinking about.
I think that's really interesting. I played around with creating a internal kind of compliance chatbot, and it was really meant to be something for the business to speak to and get quick answers to questions. And it was really funny, the experience of realizing that when I tested this chatbot, talking to it like a trained antitrust lawyer, surprise, surprise, I didn't ask the questions the same way that a business person would ask them. They started talking to the chatbot in ways that I wouldn't have anticipated, and it caused the chatbot not to be as accurate in providing answers. So that fed back into a little bit of the design behind the tool to improve it. But it's kind of goes to your point about when you're thinking about how to design a new way of delivering legal services in an enterprise, this idea of rules, not language. Now, you're at a law firm, Denisa. So who at a law firm is making those decisions and thinking about those things?
I think it's gonna be a mix between the two, and collaborating, because lawyers will always, but they will have the knowledge and the capability, extract the rules out of the what was before vast 40 pages legal memorandum. We could go to the basics. Now, what goes into transforming that into something that actually works, the technical part, obviously it helps if you have lawyers who are somewhat trained to have a little bit more understanding how the solutions work and the technical part behind them. But obviously, I think it needs to be a collaboration between the two. And I think it's more of the idea that I have, like an idea that goes to the fact that AI should do more than just speed things up. It should do more, because a lot of and this comes to another point, a lot of the innovation that is done for legal firms is with having in mind the way we have provided advice for the past decades. Due diligence, contract review, memorandums, legal research. This focuses on how we used to do things. And I think now there's a real opportunity to do things differently in-house, to apply legal rules differently in-house. And what we need is that tool that helps lawyers to actually develop something for the in-house. Or maybe not tool, maybe a training, maybe something else. But for us to be able to match what the clients are really wanting. And maybe I see it more and more that the request for the long legal opinion and the long memorandum that is written in the way that we have been writing for so long is maybe declining in the recent years. And maybe clients want more of, objective, like to the point answers. Can I do it? Or is this, what is the risk on this, evaluated one way or another?
I want to ask sort of a more philosophical question, which is, we're talking a lot about how there's innovation in-house, right? At corporate legal departments at large enterprises, which to a lot of law firm lawyers is like the third rail. They don't want to touch it. And I'm wondering, why do you find yourself running into the fire as opposed to running away from it? Because it feels like you're really embracing and trying to understand and grapple with what clients are doing internally, which can be a scary thing for law firm lawyers, because the more clients insource, that means they'll send less work to outside counsel.
With with AI tools, clients have the ability to research more in-house, do more of the review and the drafting in-house. In the conference as well, it was mentioned that clients might now come up with their own legal opinions that they would like for lawyers to review, and so on. So I think one way or another, we are going to get there. We are going to get to a point where more work is done in-house as clients take on more on the part of the in-house work. More and more strategic work remains for the lawyer. And I think this idea of moving away from the legal memorandum and going more into legal strategy and how you implement it into the company, and how every single legal aspect or rule that applies to a company might impact a certain decision made at a certain point in the company's operation. This is something new, something that, won't be, that is a new type of product that we can deliver if some of the work has already been, automated with AI. And on the other side of things, I see two risks that come with this. One is that, as we are both competition lawyers, and as we know, competition authorities can come and do a downgrade, and they will have access to every legal, tool, not legal tool, but every tech tool that you have access, that you have an account for. And that would mean primarily they would come and review your emails, maybe download them and go review them later with a representative from the company. But they would have access to your email, but it would mean that they would go and search for specific wording in the emails and try to figure out, find evidence doing so. But right now, if you have a legal AI tool or a chatbot or so on, and you have an account with it, in a downgrade, you would have to give access to that account. And if it's correlated to all your in-house work, it's very easy to find, evidence and to identify what has happened in the company, because you are going straight to the source. You are interrogating an AI that stays on top of the legal department. So that's one type of risk. And the other one is, as I've said, because if you are trying to use all legal memorandums from law firms that have been provided to your company and just apply agents on them, the mismatch between the capabilities of the agent of understanding and translating the information, because in the end, what is done in most cases, as per my experience, is that you are putting a RAG system over a bunch of documents. But that doesn't ensure you that the agent will corroborate the questions from the employees with what lays into the memorandum. So I think also that you would want the law firm to do the translation, because if they are doing this translation between what was previously said and which was based on legal articles and mentioning, referencing case law, if you make the law firm translate that into action, well, liability lies with the law firm. If you take it upon yourself in-house to do that, liability lies with you, because we gave you this memorandum that has 5 disclaimers. If you translate it yourself, then you are interpreting what we are saying. So yeah, I think it could be done by lawyers, and maybe should be done by lawyers.
So I heard a few things that I answer. One is that it actually helps you in the practice of law to really understand how clients have their system set up. Two, it improves your ability to actually service your clients and improves collaboration and all the things that have to happen when a law firm and an internal legal department are working together. And three, there's just sort of the technical acumen, right? If you see what others are doing, then you know what's coming around the corner. I like the idea that you went to this conference and tried to educate yourself on what your clients are doing. That's a really clever, tactical way to approach these conferences. That strikes me as being someone that's thinking more offensively and thinking strategically, as opposed to someone who's thinking defensively and just wants to keep up. And I would love to explore why you feel compelled to really put yourself in the shoes of your clients, as opposed to hold yourself up in an office and hope that you have billed enough hours before the end days come so you don't have to worry about it.
And I think it didn't always happen like this, but there were a lot of situations where the commercial agreement, for example, on a deal or on a, product supply deal or so on, the commercial decisions have been made. The negotiation is over when the information gets to outside counsel and outside counsel starts drafting the contract. And when you start drafting the contract, you see that, or maybe you are working on the counter draft, and you are seeing that there are a lot of other things that needed to be negotiated, or maybe things that have already been agreed that maybe should have been structured differently in consideration of how the contract is drafted and the aspect that you negotiate on the contract. And I think this idea of it's going before that happens is allowing legal advice to go from being static and being at the end of the spectrum when nobody wants to deal with it and seems like a hindrance that lawyers need to negotiate on many other points when the commercial agreement has already been done and you are very satisfied that you have a deal. So maybe just being able to draft a system that takes you from being the last point on a decision making to coming in before the negotiation ends and informing clients of all aspects that could be taken into consideration.
What you're describing to me is very tactically climbing up the value chain, which is you are thinking about how to change and improve the way you offer services, first of all, but you're also thinking about what is the highest value that I can offer to a client. And that strikes me as a really smart way to approach thinking about your career as a law firm lawyer in a world where automation and other technology allows clients to insource some of the work that law firm lawyers have depended on for many years.
And on the other hand of what has been discussed in the conference about the billable hour and the way we use tools, and in my head, everything is somewhat connected. My experience has not been that on Romanian legislation in civil law jurisdictions and on Romanian case law, and even with document analysis. I'm not saying even about like 100 contracts at a time. I'm saying about one document, maybe 1 to 5 documents into a single chat. I think even then, you still have hallucinations. You still have problems with extracting information. And conversations were going around about what will happen to, one, the billable hour, and two, what will happen to junior lawyers. And a lot of was said that junior lawyers are, maybe more technically inclined because they've grown up with technology. But in my experience, it's not that they are not, because they do have some experience with technology. But the problem is, if you are an experienced lawyer, you spot the errors of AI and hallucinations much more easily. If it invents a law that you've never seen before in a domain that you've been practicing for 10 years, it probably doesn't exist. But a junior lawyer won't be able to make that distinction. So on one hand, we have this problem that some of the research tasks that they were doing, or maybe the initial drafting of a contract that junior lawyers were doing is now maybe able to do with, you are maybe able to do it with an AI tool. But on the other hand, I don't think the responses that you are getting in complex matter and complex legislation and so on, the responses that you are getting from the AI are not to the point that they do not need a lot of review and a lot of attention paying, not maybe in the way they are writing, but maybe in the way that they interpret an article and the way there is legal reasoning. Not that they necessarily have one, but what is simulated as legal reasoning appears. And a counterpoint that I've seen to this is that you shouldn't compare the output of AI with the output of an experienced lawyer. You should compare it to the output of a junior lawyer. Well, is it though? Because was it a big problem that junior lawyers were inventing legislation? Were they coming up with their own case law and providing it to senior lawyers confidently? This really happened. I don't think that was a big problem that we had with law, before. And now with their system, they have this creativity to themselves in the way they are writing. They're not just inventing an article. They are inventing an entire story that corroborates every single fact about it. So it's really hard to spot. And with tools, you would think that with more sophisticated tools, it will become less and less. But on the other hand, with tools that are have access to more information, hallucinations actually become more complex if they are, connected to legislation and so on. They become a lot much better at inventing what a law would actually look like, or what an article actually would look like, than an agent who has not been provided with that kind of access. So my point is, one, if senior lawyers take on more and more projects and they don't provide this previous work to junior lawyers, one, you are still making a lot of decisions. You are still working with the AI. You still have to go through hallucinations. You still have to identify, no, this is correct, this is incorrect. It has interpreted this decision correctly. So you are still making a lot of mental effort and critical reasoning on all that. And maybe you get some efficiency on the final act of drafting the opinion. It helps with wording and so on, and with identifying more information with research to flag it to you. But you still have a lot of judgment calls to make. And with AI, I think on a daily basis, you have some more judgment calls to make. And I think it's just, it will get to a point where it will be too much for a senior lawyer to take on more and more. So we still need junior lawyers, but we have this problem that, one, we kind of want them to develop their reasoning capabilities as we did, to be able to analyze the law by themselves in order to form that legal reasoning. But on the other hand, for them, working with AI and factual inaccuracies is very difficult. But I think that even with working with tools, if you are a junior lawyer who is very detail-oriented, you never have to take what AI gives you as a fact. If you always question it, if you always think by yourself, would this be accurate? Would this be? I think you have the chance to develop that, legal reasoning that senior lawyers have developed in the past. But we have to be realistic about the fact that it will mean that it will take them a lot of time to do that. It will not be efficient from day one for them to be using AI tools. But this is in my context, in civil law jurisdiction with complex legislation, with non-standardized documents and contracts. Maybe in other jurisdiction, it's easier.
It just struck me that most of the time when I hear a law firm lawyer talking about how do you train a junior associate, it's often like a senior partner at a large law firm who probably doesn't really interact with first or second year associates outside of like the happy hour or social events. And that the real work of training those junior lawyers actually falls on people like you, right? Counsel and senior associates, mid-level associates. Those are people who actually are training junior lawyers. So Have you changed your approach to mentoring or training first or second year associates or trainees or interns?
One thing I did, and I honestly do not have the perfect solution yet to your questions.
It's a really tough question. I haven't heard anyone really have a good answer yet, but I think it's something that's nice to think through and talk about because it feels like it's becoming very real very quickly.
What I tried initially, of course, the first thing I did with AI was take on more research on myself in order to be able to test the tools and use the tools and see how they're performing and learn more about it. I had to do it, in big part all by myself to, be able to gain that experience. And after some time, going back with working with maybe junior lawyers, I was trying to explain the way I would approach a task in this new world. For example, I would use Gemini Deep Research for 1, 2, 3 points, and I would just tell them how what I would search for, what my prompt would look like, what I was looking for in the response, and so on. And just instead of just providing the task and letting them figure out how to use AI on it, I would provide the task and explain each step that I would do with AI for that task. But that's how I figure out that it's a lot harder for them than it is for me, because I've seen that they weren't able to catch up with all that, because AI, we are constantly discussing about efficiency, but in many situations, it translates to reading a lot more because it provides with so much information, and a lot of it is not relevant to what you are actually looking for in that case. And you have to be able to cut through the nonsense. And for them, it's not as easy. So as I've mentioned, so that thing kind of failed. And now maybe I will try to focus more on enhancing their capabilities to work directly with the law. No, like you still, and I still do it myself. It's not like I haven't been doing this recently, going and reading the entire legislation before starting to respond to a question just because I know the AI. Because, for example, in insurance legislation, Romanian insurance legislation, which partially translates EU legislation, AI just wrecked under that test because one article is corroborated to other 7 articles and so on. And it just couldn't figure out that I had to do it by hand. I have to read the whole legislation by myself, what was relevant for my case. So what I would do with junior lawyers would be the same. Don't try to ask the question that was provided by the client and have AI respond and just work with that response. Use it in order to go through the legal articles faster, asking questions about the legislation, summarizing the case law, and having AI put highlights where it has extracted information so you can see it quickly. But do the reasoning by yourself, but have it help you, assist you in everything else to be able to go through information faster.
I like your point about more content means there's more noise. And we forget that as more senior lawyers, we just have more confidence in skimming that stuff and skipping. And that could be quite intimidating, I imagine, to a first year associate who feels like, well, if I'm not reading this, then am I going to miss something? That's a great point.
And this is an amazing point for the billable hour discussion, because we are having this conversation about the change that will come to our pricing because we are assuming that we are gaining efficiency and that we'll do that as faster, and so it won't be justified. But on the other hand, what I'm experiencing is not only that you can do things faster, but the bar for what would mean to do a really good opinion for the client has been raised. Because before, I wouldn't have been able to go through 6,000 Consumer Protection Authority sanctioning decisions to see if particular situations were as similar to my client was sanctioned. And it wouldn't have been feasible in any circumstance. but now I can do that with AI. And it might influence the decision that I make or the information that I provide to the client. So yeah, that analysis will take some time, of obviously enhanced by AI, not that much, but it will take some time. But I think that the way we provide assistance to our clients has been enhanced by it. And for example, we did some there was an amendment to the Romanian FDI regime, foreign direct investment regime, in January, and we were providing amendments to the law. Now I was able to go through the French regime, the Italian regime, the German regime, and just extract from them everything that would make our legislation make more sense and be, more oriented toward the client. I would have never been able to do something like that. So these are some examples of things that are completely enhanced and modify the output that we give, and less about how much time we spend finishing them.
Your example really makes me think of that weird element of the inefficiency of AI. And so from a law firm's perspective, if you have a junior associate doing things that cannot be billed to the client, that's a cost to the law firm. You're paying that person to be there. So at that point, it's a training cost. That time is not generating revenue. That's a cost to the law firm. And there are all these little ways where relying on AI is actually potentially increasing non-billable time, right? Because if you have an associate who has to be taught how to use AI, but more directly, who has to be given feedback in real time on how to use the AI, an associate who has to be told, okay, actually go back to the code and read the code because it's important for you to root yourself in the code so that you know how to tell what the AI is saying is hallucinating or not. I imagine a lot of that, if not most of it, is not billable to the client. So what does that mean for the law firm business model? Does that mean that you bill more for the hours that the junior associate does do? Is this just replacing other kinds of non-billable time that already existed so that in the end, it kind of washes out, meaning there's not more non-billable time, there's just a different kind of non-billable time?
As much as there's a lot of discussion of efficiency and speed and vendor demos, in conversations with other lawyers, I think, and even in the conference and everything that was that I was talking with other colleagues from law firms, we are still trying to figure out the way to do it. Everybody's just in the beginning of things, and one thing that was clear was that without proper somewhat technical training for all lawyers in a firm, not just junior lawyers, you won't be able to raise adoption because, everybody has the pressure of the billable hours, and experimenting with AI takes a lot of time. And you would need for them to be given the opportunity to spend some time experimenting with this in order for them to build some skills that will be later on more valuable. And that was the consensus of what I was understanding, that we have been experimenting with the tools. You maybe have gotten out of it some power users that have had the experience, and now those power users can go and be able to, in correlation with maybe an innovation director, someone actually technical that you have in the law firm, they could go back and speed up the process of everyone just trying to learn on their own. But what is needed in it is, real examples. Because if technical people can present the solution, can present how it was developed and what are the functionalities. What lawyers need are real examples. If you do due diligence, you should do it like this: 1, 2, 3, these steps to extract the best factual accuracy that you can extract. If you want to do legal research, you should do this. You need that kind of training to be able to speed that process up and not take forever for everybody in the firm to experiment and, gain that experience.
That's a really good point. Not everyone has to be at the same level of proficiency in using these tools for the whole organization to benefit. Let's take a second to talk about the other part of the kind of profit calculation at a law firm, which is the revenue side. As you move up the value chain and as you sort of, let's say, create new legal services or new offerings to your clients, the billable hour may not always make sense for capturing the value that those create, right? So back to your example earlier of a more proactive advisory that takes you out of just a defensive posture, takes you out of the mode of being just like a widget manufacturer of legal output, but really being more of a strategic advisor to your client that is anticipating what their needs might be and heading off issues and risks before they turn into something big. I completely agree that that is the core thing that AI really helps law firm lawyers be able to offer. And it's a huge advantage that they have, I think, now versus other legal tech providers. But how do you capture that value? Because the billable hour may not actually really fully capture it.
I wouldn't be able to provide you with an answer because I'm still looking, for the perfect case of actually being able to implement this and actually being able to do it and seeing it actually perform, actually work, and maybe then think about how it would be priced. But that's only my thinking. Maybe more experienced lawyers have already an understanding of how that would be priced.
Doubt it. Doubt it.
But a lot of really good points. I've also attended a Tech Target event that was a pre-event to the conference. And it was absolutely amazing. It was a smaller event, and points were made about the billable hour that it's not just the pricing of our work, is the way that the work of lawyers is evaluated, is the way that what you consider a good year to be is evaluated, is it has much more, what promotions are correlated maybe with, and so on. So it's not, if you eliminate it, you don't just eliminate the pricing, you eliminate a lot of structures that already exist in law firms. But for obviously switching, it's not like we didn't have fixed fees so far. Like, it's not like they didn't exist. But maybe the sense of what was discussed in the conference and the audit was that maybe we will lose more and more of our work towards that and less, being correlated with the hours.
And as you embed yourself with a client and become more of a strategic advisor, a counselor, you also create a stronger relationship, and you create a relationship that can generate longer revenue over time. And my personal hope is that AI is something that allows law firm lawyers to move away from the sort of billable hour factory that corporate law firms have become. I'm not calling any out by a name. I'm just saying as a business model, they've become factories for creating outputs. And I could see how that was quite lucrative, but I don't know that it's the most fulfilling way to do the work. And also, I don't know if it's the highest value add to the clients. And so if there's a way to use AI to automate away some of that and instead refocus the relationship on having outside counsel be something closer to like a strategic advisor, I know that for sure there's a lot of value to unlock there. I admit completely that I have no idea how you unlock that value in terms of pricing and business model, but it feels like there's an opportunity there, and I hope it doesn't go wasted by seeing AI as just purely a productivity tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed talking to law firm lawyers who are on the front lines of deploying technology, but more interesting, I think, from this conversation is thinking about what their clients need. It's very nice and refreshing to hear you're thinking about your clients, because obviously you want to be a better outside counsel, but also you're positioning yourself for the future. So thank you for sharing your insights on that.
Thank you.